For over half a century, the blonde bombshell was more than a type. It was an icon, a cinematic shorthand for glamour, desire, spectacle. It wasn't just about hair color, it was about presence, attitude, timing. Whether they were walking into a scene or simply standing still, these women had a way of turning the room and the camera in their direction. In each decade, the image evolved. In the 1930s, it was electricity in silk gowns. In the 50s, curves and innuendo. By the 80s, it was full-volume power and unapologetic confidence. Some played seductresses, others symbols of innocence with an edge, but all of them shared something essential: a look, a moment, a mythology built not just on beauty, but on impact. This is a look back at the blonde bombshells who didn't just star in their eras. They came to define them. From the silver haze of old Hollywood to the soft glow sheen of the 90s, these are the faces that shaped desire, dominated screens, and turned glamour into legend. Before Marilyn, before Monroe was even Monroe, there was Jean Harlow, the woman who practically invented the term blonde bombshell. In the early 1930s, when talkies were still new and glamour was finding its sound, Harlow stepped onto the screen like she was born for the spotlight. With platinum blonde hair so luminous it looked almost metallic under studio lights, she brought something electric to every frame. A mix of sass, sensuality, and complete control over her image. Her breakout came with Hell's Angels, 1930, and what followed was a series of roles that pushed boundaries for the time. Films like Red Dust, 1932, Dinner at 8, 1933, and Bombshell, 1933, didn't just feature her, they were vehicles for her personality. Quick-witted, unapologetically flirtatious, and full of contradiction. She could play both the vamp and the girl next door, sometimes in the same scene. But Harlow's impact wasn't just in her performances, it was in how she looked and moved through the world. Studio publicists bleached her eyebrows, dyed her hair impossibly light, and presented her as both ethereal and earthy. She was a fantasy wrapped in attitude, and audiences couldn't get enough. She wasn't just selling tickets, she was selling the idea that a woman could own her sexuality, speak fast, and still dominate the frame. Sadly, Harlow's career was short. She died at just 26, but her influence was lasting. Every blonde starlet who came after, from Monroe to Madonna, owed something to her. Jean Harlow didn't just set the standard, she defined the role, and in doing so, she became the blueprint for every blonde bombshell who followed. If Jean Harlow was the blueprint, Mae West was the headline. By the time Hollywood caught up to her, she was already a sensation, a vaudeville veteran, playwright, and one-woman publicity machine. What set Mae apart wasn't just her platinum curls or hourglass silhouette, but the way she spoke, slow, sly, and loaded with innuendo. She didn't just deliver lines, she dropped them like velvet punches. In films like She Done Him Wrong, 1933, and I'm No Angel, 1933, West played characters who were always in control, of men, of money, of the moment. Her image was unapologetically self-styled, dripping in jewels, draped in satin, and always walking like the world was her personal stage. Unlike other bombshells who were shaped by studios, Mae wrote her own material, literally. She built her persona one quip at a time, and behind the sultry delivery and larger-than-life presence was a sharp mind. She understood how to provoke and market controversy without ever crossing the line Hollywood couldn't afford. When censors came for her, she leaned in. When critics underestimated her, she sold out theaters. Mae West wasn't just a bombshell, she was a brand. Irreverent, commanding, and decades ahead of her time. Lana Turner didn't have to chase fame. It found her. The story is now legend. Discovered sipping a soda at a counter on Sunset Boulevard, she was just a teenager when Hollywood claimed her. And almost overnight, she became the face of a new kind of blonde allure. Softer than Mae West, more modern than Jean Harlow, and perfectly made for the glossy Technicolor future. She rose in the late 1930s, but truly defined the 1940s with a blend of innocence and heat that made her irresistible on screen. Her nickname, the Sweater Girl, came from her appearance in They Won't Forget, 1937, where a simple tight-knit top caused a national sensation. The look seemed effortless, but the impact was deliberate. Lana made glamour look casual and casual look dangerous. In Ziegfeld Girl, 1941, The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1946, and countless melodramas, she mastered the role of the woman with a secret, the beauty whose smile suggested something deeper, maybe darker. There was vulnerability beneath the polish, and that tension made her unforgettable. Off-screen, her life was just as dramatic. Scandals, affairs, and a tabloid frenzy followed her every move, but instead of breaking her, it made her more mythic. Lana Turner wasn't just a blonde bombshell. She became a cautionary tale wrapped in fur, fame, and lipstick. She embodied the danger and allure of being too beautiful in a town that feeds on both. Veronica Lake didn't need volume to be noticed. Just a glance, a lock of hair, and a voice like silk over static. At just 5 feet tall, she wasn't the most imposing presence in a room, but on screen, she seemed untouchable. With her signature peekaboo hairstyle, a soft wave cascading over one eye, she became an instant visual phenomenon. Moviegoers copied the look. Fashion houses reimagined it. And suddenly, Lake wasn't just acting in films, she was shaping how women styled themselves in real life. She rose to stardom during World War II, often paired with Alan Ladd in a string of noir films that blurred the line between desire and danger. In This Gun for Hire, 1942, The Glass Key, 1942, and The Blue Dahlia, 1946, Lake perfected the cool, calm, and slightly distant blonde, the kind who didn't need to explain herself. Her beauty was quiet, almost ghostly, and utterly magnetic. But her off-screen story didn't mirror her on-screen poise. Career struggles, studio battles, and personal troubles chipped away at her fame too quickly. By the early 1950s, Veronica Lake had all but vanished from the spotlight. Still, her image lingered. That hair, that voice, that stillness. She became the blueprint for the noir blonde, the cool femme fatale with secrets behind her eyes. Veronica Lake didn't flash or shout. She smoldered. And for a brief, unforgettable window of time, she was the most hypnotic face on the screen. While Veronica Lake was mystery, Betty Grable was sunshine. Radiant, energetic, and proudly all-American. With platinum hair, a megawatt smile, and legs insured for $1 million, she wasn't just a pinup girl. She was the pinup girl. During World War II, her image became iconic. A one-piece bathing suit, a coy glance over the shoulder, and the kind of confidence that felt both wholesome and undeniably alluring. But Grable wasn't just a photograph. She was one of the highest-paid stars of the 1940s, headlining a string of Technicolor musicals that offered wartime audiences a dose of escapism and glamour. Films like Moon Over Miami, 1941, Pin-Up Girl, 1944, and How to Marry a Millionaire, 1953, alongside Monroe and Bacall, showcased her comedic timing, dance skills, and magnetic charm. She wasn't mysterious or dramatic, she was vibrant, and that made her beloved. She had an accessibility that made millions of soldiers pin her photo to their lockers, yet she never lost the aura of stardom. There was something iconic in her simplicity. A blonde bombshell not wrapped in shadow but lit by studio sun. Betty Grable didn't need scandal. She had presence. And in a time when America needed hope, she gave it a face and in a pose way that still endures. No history of blonde bombshells exists without Marilyn Monroe. More than a star, she became a symbol. Not just of sensuality, but of vulnerability, of longing, of that fragile line between being seen and being understood. By the early 1950s, her face was everywhere. Her breathy voice, platinum curls, and half-smile became so iconic that people stopped seeing the person behind them. She wasn't playing a character. She had become one. Films like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, The 7-Year Itch, 1955, and Some Like It Hot, 1959, cemented her place in cinematic history. Her screen presence was playful, yet aching, comedic, but touched with sadness, a contradiction that felt very human. Marilyn had the rare gift of appearing both polished and completely exposed, and yet, despite the spotlight, her personal life was turbulent. She fought for respect in an industry that saw her as decoration. She founded her own production company. She studied method acting. She wanted more. Behind the image was a woman constantly negotiating between how she looked and what she wanted to be. Marilyn Monroe didn't just define the blonde bombshell, she elevated it, made it complex, tragic, luminous. Her death in 1962 froze her in time, but the myth only grew. To this day, her image is printed, parodied, and preserved, a permanent echo of a decade obsessed with perfection and the pain behind it. If Marilyn was mystery, Jayne Mansfield was volume. Bold, curvy, and always camera-ready, she leaned into the blonde bombshell archetype with such intensity that she practically redefined it. Jayne didn't just walk into a room, she arrived. Publicists didn't have to invent her aura, she handed it to them, headline by headline. Her breakout film, The Girl Can't Help It, 1956, set the tone. With a walk that felt choreographed to swing music and a smile that dared you to underestimate her, she became a media sensation. She posed for every camera, crashed every party, and made the news whether she tried or not. While some saw her as a Monroe imitation, Jayne was doing something more exaggerated, almost cartoonish. And that was the point. Her career was filled with both Hollywood roles and low-budget spectacles, but what never wavered was her commitment to being seen. She played dumb, but was whip-smart. She flaunted her figure, but negotiated her contracts. Jayne Mansfield turned fame into performance art, and the world couldn't look away. Her life ended tragically in 1967, but by then her legend had already been written. She wasn't just a bombshell, she was the overexposed, over-sensationalized version of it, a blonde hurricane in pink satin. While Marilyn and Jayne took the spotlight, Mamie Van Doren carved out her own lane and made sure you remembered her name. She had the look, bleached blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, and a figure that defied studio costume designers. But Mamie also had attitude. She was brassy, knowing, and unafraid to push buttons. Her filmography leaned hard into exploitation. Titles like Untamed Youth, 1957, and Girlstown, 1959, gave her room to rebel, flirt, and perform with a wink. She wasn't subtle. She didn't try to be. Mamie's persona was pure mid-century heat, a teenager's daydream filtered through B-movie lighting and beach party soundtracks. She often played the bad girl, or the misunderstood one. And off-screen, she didn't shy away from controversy. If the press wanted scandal, she gave them something to print. If producers offered bland roles, she posed for another cover. Mamie Van Doren understood how Hollywood worked, and she wasn't afraid to play by her own rules. While she never reached Monroe's global status, she outlasted both her contemporaries, continuing to work, appear, and reinvent her image for decades. In many ways, Mamie was the most self-aware of the trio, a woman who saw the bombshell archetype, grabbed it, and said, "Fine, I'll play your game, but on my terms." In 1960s, few faces symbolized liberation like Brigitte Bardot. With her tousled hair, sun-kissed skin, and pout that looked both innocent and knowing, Bardot wasn't just a star, she was a movement. While American bombshells of the previous decade leaned on studio-managed curves and glamour lighting, Bardot emerged as something looser, freer, more dangerous in her casualness. Her breakthrough in God Created Woman, 1956, caused a sensation, but it was in the 1960s that her image crystallized. Films like Contempt, 1963, and Viva Maria, 1965, showed that she could play light and seductive or existential and remote, always magnetic, always impossible to ignore. Directors didn't just cast her, they styled the camera around her. She didn't act like a bombshell, she simply was. Off-screen, Bardot lived in the same register, refusing Hollywood, speaking out, aging on her own terms. There was no manufactured perfection. She often appeared without makeup, barefoot, unfiltered, and that only deepened her impact. Brigitte Bardot wasn't about playing the fantasy. She was the fantasy, and perhaps more importantly, the refusal to be owned by it. Sharon Tate's screen presence was like light through lace, soft, flawless, yet just out of reach. She didn't need heavy dialogue or dramatic arcs to hold attention. Her beauty was nearly surreal, almost painted on, and she seemed to float through scenes with a kind of ethereal detachment. But beneath the surface, there was control, subtle wit, and growing depth. Films like Valley of the Dolls, 1967, and The Fearless Vampire Killers, 1967, positioned her as both glamorously modern and playfully self-aware. Tate wasn't just another blonde in a bikini. She had a sense of timing and irony, and was beginning to subvert the very image she was often cast for. Though her career was just taking off, the industry had already begun to see her as something beyond beautiful. Roman Polanski saw it. Critics were starting to see it. And then, everything stopped. Her murder in 1969 was not just tragic, it became cultural trauma. Her name became shorthand for innocence lost, for glamour turned violent, for a decade that had spiraled into darkness. In death, Sharon Tate became a myth. But in life, she was something rare. A blonde bombshell whose strength was subtle, whose talent was blooming, and whose legacy feels suspended in time. Ela Summer brought something to the blonde bombshell legacy that few others did. A German accent, a European edge, and a sense of control behind the curves. She arrived in Hollywood at a time when international actresses were often placed in decorative roles. Ela wasn't just decoration. She was dynamite in a sundress. Humorous, self-assured, and unafraid to lean into parody. Throughout the 1960s, she appeared in comedies, thrillers, and even horror, from A Shot in the Dark, 1964, with Peter Sellers, to The Oscar, 1966, and Barren Blood, 1972. She was a favorite for posters and magazine spreads, but she also held her own opposite seasoned actors. With her commanding gaze, statuesque figure, and perfectly timed wit, Ela gave the bombshell archetype a cosmopolitan upgrade. She didn't come across as fragile or manipulated. There was something self-possessed about her, a blend of elegance and unshakable presence. And long before the term camp had found its place in pop culture, Ela understood how to play sexy and funny, sometimes at the same time. She may not be as instantly recalled as Monroe or Bardot, but in the 1960s, Ela Summer was everywhere, and always unmistakably blonde. There are images that define a decade, and Farrah Fawcett's red swimsuit poster is one of them. Smiling, tousled, tan, and golden from head to toe, she became the face of 1970s American beauty almost overnight. But her impact went far beyond a photograph. As one of the original stars of Charlie's Angels, 1976, she brought something new to the blonde bombshell: athleticism, charisma, and a kind of sunny confidence that didn't need to flirt to be powerful. Farrah's beauty felt approachable, as if the fantasy had moved next door. Her feathered hair became a national obsession, her voice was soft, her laugh genuine, And yet, beneath the breezy image, she was ambitious and uncompromising. She left Charlie's Angels after just one season, determined to pursue more serious roles, and eventually stunned critics with a raw dramatic performance in The Burning Bed, 1984. But in the 1970s, she didn't need method acting to own the screen. Farrah simply walked into a scene and the world paid attention. Not just a bombshell, but a symbol of California freedom, television fame, and the irresistible glow of a woman completely at ease in her own light. Susan George had the look of a girl next door, blonde, soft-featured, delicate. But her filmography was anything but innocent. Throughout the 1970s, she carved a niche as a blonde with danger in her eyes, playing women caught in dark, often violent situations that tested the limits of her sweetness. And in doing so, she gave the bombshell archetype a kind of cinematic tension it rarely held before. In Straw Dogs, 1971, she delivered a haunting performance as Amy, a woman whose sexuality, trauma, and emotional complexity were at the center of a film that was anything but soft. George walked a razor-thin line between vulnerability and provocation, and it made her unforgettable. She wasn't the Hollywood blonde. She was British, cool-toned, and often cast in thrillers, horror, or edgy dramas, but that contrast made her more striking. She wasn't designed for adoration, she was meant to unsettle. Susan George took the visual language of the blonde bombshell and filled it with emotional ambiguity, and in doing so, left a mark far deeper than glamour alone ever could. Cibil Shepard was the kind of blonde you didn't quite trust, and couldn't stop watching. She debuted on screen in The Last Picture Show, 1971, a black and white coming-of-age story where her beauty was weaponized, and brilliantly so. With pale eyes, delicate features, and an aloof delivery, she seemed born to play the kind of woman whose mystery said more than her dialogue. Throughout the decade, Cibil was often cast in roles that played off her beauty, sometimes as satire, sometimes as tragedy. In Taxi Driver, 1976, she embodied the impossible girl, pristine, distant, unattainable. Her characters often seemed slightly detached from the world around them, as if they were observing rather than participating, and that made them hypnotic. What set Cibil apart was intelligence. Behind the softness was sharp wit and a refusal to be boxed in. She transitioned to television with Moonlighting in the 1980s, proving she could be comedic, quick, and undeniably modern. But in the 1970s, she helped redefine the blonde bombshell for a new kind of cinema, one less about seduction and more about subtext. Cibil Shepard was beauty you couldn't pin down, and that was exactly the point. Bo Derek didn't have to say much. Sometimes she didn't say anything at all. Her breakout moment came in 1979, running along a beach in a nude one-piece swimsuit and cornrowed hair. Slow motion, waves crashing, a vision engineered for pure cinematic fantasy. She didn't just enter pop culture. She detonated into it. Through the 1980s, Bo became a symbol of visual perfection. She wasn't cast to deliver monologues. She was cast to embody something idealized, beauty so stylized it became surreal. Films like Tarzan the Ape Man, 1981, and Bolero, 1984, often directed by her husband John Derek, leaned heavily into visual sensuality. The scripts were secondary. The frame was everything. But beneath the fantasy, there was a brand being built. Bo Derek knew exactly what she represented and leaned into it with precision. She didn't attempt to become the next Streep or Field. She occupied her own category entirely. A blonde bombshell designed for posters, magazine spreads, and late-night VHS rentals. And in that lane, she became untouchable. Bo Derek wasn't a scene stealer. She was the scene. Kim Basinger brought back the old-school bombshell with new-school polish. Her looks were undeniably classic. Icy blonde hair, statuesque figure, cheekbones that could cut glass. But her performances added something rare, vulnerability. A kind of emotional tremble beneath the glamour that made her more than just a visual presence. She was a woman you couldn't look away from, not because of the way she looked, but because of how she felt on screen. She stunned in 9.5 Weeks, 1986, opposite Mickey Rourke, where she walked a line between control and surrender that made the film both controversial and iconic. Her role in Batman, 1989, as Vicky Vale brought her to blockbuster audiences, but she never sacrificed elegance for spectacle. Even in the loudest films, she moved quietly, but with precision. Off-screen, Basinger was famously private, adding to her mystique. She didn't chase stardom, it found her. Her image, part Hitchcock blonde, part modern muse, helped define the 1980s idea of luxury, of softness with an edge, of beauty that never needed to raise its voice. Kim Basinger wasn't trying to be the next Monroe. She was rewriting the role entirely. Morgan Fairchild didn't just walk into a room, she entered. With perfect posture, tailored shoulder pads, and hair as big as her presence, she became the definitive blonde bombshell of primetime television. In shows like Flamingo Road and Falcon Crest, and guest roles across nearly every TV drama of the era, she played powerful women who dressed like wealth and spoke like they owned the script. Fairchild brought a theatricality to the role. Not camp, but command. She wasn't just beautiful, she was expensive. A vision in satin with a vocabulary full of ultimatums. Her image, often mistaken for parody in hindsight, was dead serious at the time, and incredibly effective. While she did film work as well, it was on television that Morgan Fairchild ruled. She turned the screen into a fashion show of diamonds, silk, and sly glances. She wasn't designed to look relatable. She was designed to look unreachable. And in that, she captured the 80s spirit of aspiration perfectly. She was the blonde bombshell in full control, not waiting to be desired, but expecting it. Pamela Anderson didn't just show up. She set the tone. With her high-cut red swimsuit, cascading platinum hair, and slow-motion run across the beaches of Baywatch, she became one of the most recognizable faces on Earth. But Pamela wasn't just a TV star, she was a visual phenomenon, the kind of image that moved posters, calendars, and primetime ratings with equal power. Her rise began in the pages of Playboy, where she appeared a record-breaking 14 times. But it was Baywatch that turned her into an international symbol. She wasn't just a character, she was a brand. Every move she made, every outfit she wore, every look she gave the camera, was amplified by a global media machine hungry for spectacle. Anderson understood this. She played into the fantasy, yes, but she also subtly controlled it. There was a self-awareness behind her smile, a wink behind the performance. Whether starring in Barbed Wire, 1996, or navigating the tabloid circus around her personal life, Pamela remained defiantly visible. Not for depth, not for versatility, but for pure presence. She was the last truly analog bombshell, one that couldn't be filtered or fabricated, just lightning in a swimsuit captured on tape. If Pamela Anderson was the queen of mainstream bombshell fame, Anna Nicole Smith was its wild card. Unpredictable, untamed, and magnetic in ways that were often hard to explain. Her early modeling career rocketed when she was named Playmate of the Year in 1993, but her look, exaggerated curves, platinum curls, and that soft Texas accent made her feel like a throwback to Monroe, only louder, bolder, and more tabloid-ready. Her acting career was brief but unforgettable. The Naked Gun 33 1/3, The Final Insult 1994, To the Limit 1995, and a string of late-night cable films that leaned heavily on her image. But it wasn't about scripts, it was about spectacle. Anna Nicole was a walking headline, whether marrying an 89-year-old billionaire or starring in her own reality show. The camera loved her, even when the narrative didn't. There was a chaotic vulnerability to her fame, a woman both in control and utterly exposed. In many ways, Anna Nicole embodied the 1990s in full. Glossy, absurd, excessive, and unforgettable. She wasn't here to be subtle. She was here to be seen. Heather Locklear had the kind of Hollywood beauty that seemed designed for network television. Symmetrical, polished, and camera-perfect from every angle. But unlike many of her blonde contemporaries, she brought a sharpness, a kind of steely charm beneath the gloss. She didn't play the victim. She played the problem, and audiences loved her for it. Her breakout came with Dynasty in the 80s, but it was in Melrose Place, 1993, 1999, that she truly claimed her place in the blonde bombshell pantheon. As Amanda Woodward, she turned icy ambition into art form. Power suits, blood-red lipstick, and that patented glare. She wasn't just part of the drama, she was the drama. Unlike Pamela or Anna Nicole, Heather didn't need swimwear or scandal. Her bombshell power came from authority, timing, and charisma. She made office buildings look sexy, she turned soap tropes into high fashion, and she did it all with a calm precision that made chaos seem curated. Heather Locklear was less centerfold and more boardroom siren. But make no mistake, she was still a bombshell. Just the kind that never had to raise her voice to steal a scene.